Welcome into Illinois in Focus Daily. It is Friday, October 18th. I'm Greg Bishop. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join us each and every weekday morning at 8 o'clock where we break down things you needed to know to get on with your day. Was on the road the past couple of days visiting several different gun stores, and we'll talk a lot about that coming up later on, especially with anticipation of Judge Stephen McGlynn issuing a ruling in the gun ban challenge at some point after Monday. We'll also talk about Secretary of State Alexi Giannoulias yesterday in Chicago unveiling a new DMV ATM. Interesting technology, says isn't going to cost taxpayers anything, but if you use it, you are going to be charged about $5 just for that transaction. Apparently, it's going to pay for itself. So we'll talk about that as well. But up next, we got to connect with the Center Square's reporter in Chicago, Jim Talamonte. He's, of course, been inside the courtroom as jurors are being selected. We'll get the latest in the developments of the corruption case against former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan. So that's all on the way here on this Friday. Back at it with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and get Illinois in Focus anywhere you get your podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus. Former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan could start hearing opening statements in the corruption trial he is standing for alongside co-defendants Mike McLean, longtime Madigan confidant, and also former state's representative and lobbyist. Well, somebody who's been in the courtroom all this time is Jim Talamonte, and he joins us now to talk about juror selection and how it's still ongoing in that federal courtroom up in Chicago. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for taking time with us. We've been keeping you updated on the Madigan case, and a lot of things are going to be happening in the weeks ahead. But to get more of where we're at in the case right now, let's connect with the Center Square's Jim Talamonte, who's been in the courtroom. Jim, thanks for taking time with us and breaking down what's going on there. So we're still looking at, 11 more weeks of trial?
Yes, that's the estimate. It's gone up from 10 to 11 just in the wake of the slow pace of questioning of jurors. And it's you expect with a high-profile defendant like Mike Madigan, a lot of people are going to be eliminated because of they're going in with preconceived ideas about Madigan. They've heard a lot about him. There's been a lot of questioning about what have you heard in the news, that kind of thing. So you expect that, but the slow pace of the questioning is what has, I think, gotten under the skin of a very, very patient judge, John Robert Blakey, who's let attorneys, to paraphrase the judge, you're litigating this. He said, I'm not going to rush the process. But then multiple times now he's suggested the possibility of what he called a shot clock. And he's not implemented that for jury questioning. But when he suggested that, the pace did pick up because we had attorneys, especially on the defense side, repeating the same question multiple times. Or one defense team would ask a question and the other defense team, McLean and Madigan have separate defense teams here, they would repeat the same question. And prosecutors were on board with the shot clock and he loved it. But the judge, made a point to them as well. It's like, well, you haven't objected. Some of these, if you object to some of these lines of questioning, I might sustain some of these, but so I'm not sure if the prosecution's been at times put to sleep, as some of us observing at times have been, by the slow pace of some of the defense attorneys in particular. But the process has taken, I would say, a lot longer than it should, just in terms of getting through people. There are people who are, spending their time making the sacrifice to be a potential juror, and they're up there on the stand for 35, 40, in some cases, 45 minutes, or even one or two were up there for almost an hour. And it really wasn't necessary, especially in the case of several who you felt early on were going to be struck by challenges and were not going to be part of the jury, but the questioning would continue and continue, sometimes off topic. So it's been a slow moving process, even for a high profile case. But we are nearing the end of it. We need two more alternates, and then opening statements. The target is Monday afternoon. The judge's instructions at 12:30. He says they'll take about 31 minutes. And then the attorneys did give their estimates for their opening statements. Prosecutors 2 hours, and then the defense attorneys 1 hour from the Madigan team and 1 hour from the McLean team.
So clearly things are going to be picking up pace a bit, especially as you get opening statements and then you get the prosecution bringing up witnesses, showing off evidence, playing, I'm sure, recordings, either video or audio. It really is going to be interesting to see what kinds of evidence they do present, and then the defense responding to all of that. But back to the jury, why is it so important from some of the observers you talk to of trying to weed out somebody who may have a preconceived notion about lobbying, or a preconceived notion about Madigan, or a preconceived notion about, prosecution of cases like these? Why is this so important that they get this right?
Yeah, well, I think that just several reasons, but I think in particular, there've really been a lot of questions about feelings about this, feelings about that. One prospective juror who didn't make didn't make it was talked about how he watches Fox News, and then the defense attorney Tom Breen, one of the Madigan attorneys, proceeded to go on about how, there's a political side to Fox News, and he got into several political issues, which would seem to have nothing to do with this trial, but just kind of linking the fact that, Madigan was a supporter of same-sex marriage. Madigan, there's been a lot of talk about unions, of course. So people who may have feelings one way or the other about these things, would that influence their decision about Madigan? It shouldn't. The judge multiple times, and attorneys even, have asked, well, can you be fair? Can you put your feelings aside and only follow the law as described by the judge? And people, one after another, prospective jurors, have said yes. So in really, Greg, you're right. Just because you may have heard something negative about Mike Madigan doesn't mean you can't apply the law correctly, right? But defense attorneys have been very focused on that. And on the McLean side, lobbying is a big thing, as you mentioned, because McLean was a state rep, went right into being a lobbyist. I talked a few weeks ago with State Rep Dave Severin about how we really need ethics reform here, and that people can go right from being a lawmaker to a lobbyist, and there's a lot of overlap, so to speak. He didn't use that word, but it's too. There should be a cooling off period. Essentially,
the revolving door. Yeah, the revolving door at the State House is interesting to see, especially if you get a legislator who retires in the middle of their term, and then just moments later they then pop into being a lobbyist, and it's fascinating to see that. So yeah, clearly there's going to be a lot of conversation leading up to the election about Madigan's case, and then you get veto session after that, and Madigan's case is going to continue. So that'll be hanging over veto session, and whether or not they act on any kind of ethics reforms at the State House during fall veto session, I guess we'll see. But Jim, it's very possible this case could stretch into the early part of the new year.
I think that, and a number of other reporters in the media pool have been regularly covering this, and I don't sense we've had quite the media hordes that we had in the days of the Blagojevich trial or the George Ryan trial before that, which is a little troubling, I think. And one of the experts I talked to this week, Lisa Kaplan from Reform for Illinois, was concerned about that. So, here's Mike Madigan was more powerful than Blagojevich or Ryan, I would argue. For 30 years, he was the speaker, and pretty much all legislation went through him. And as Representative Severin said, if you weren't, he would make sure things he didn't like would not even get to committee. There was so much power and control. And yet it seems that this has been, as Elisa Kaplan said, maybe overshadowed by, obviously we're going into a presidential election that a lot of people, some prospective jurors have talked about that when they're pressed on politics. Well, I'm following the presidential election. They're not so into the local, sausage making of government. But even so, this is a major case, and especially when you look at how long it took to build this case against Madigan. I mean, going back 10 years, with some of the work that the prosecution and the federal prosecutors put into this, it's really remarkable how long it's taken to get us to this point. So I guess I shouldn't be bothered by a little bit of inefficiency here and there in the courtroom if the truth is ultimately arrived at. But again, it's been a little bit of a slow process at times.
Yeah, so the impact this is going to have on the election unknown, the impact it's going to have on the legislature in fall veto session or for lame duck session at the beginning of January, if it stretches on into that, because, Jim, we got the holiday season coming up rapidly. Has there been any indication of the judge kind of laying out the schedule? What's going to happen around Thanksgiving? What's going to happen around Christmas or even New Year?
Yeah, well, he has said, a couple of prospective jurors said, well, I have a trip planned for, December 27th or, dates. He said, well, I don't think this will affect that. And there were some, muffled mumblings in the overflow courtroom among media saying, well, the way we're going here, this, one reporter said, we may not have opening statements till Thanksgiving. Well, that he was exaggerating, but unless the pace picks up, and he may have to implement the shot clock. He's talked about doing this for when witnesses take the stand. He says, I don't want to do this, but if I see inefficiency or if I feel I have to, I will. And again, this is probably more targeting the defense, although prosecutors too at times. There's been a lot of questioning about video games. Apparently they have concerns. And I think this was a factor in either the ComEd trial or one of the related trials before that the concern about gamers not being able to tear themselves away from those communities and be a focused juror. So make what you will of that. But I'm concerned that just by the way things have moved. Not that 2 weeks is an incredible amount of time for jury selection. And again, a case with someone as big a name as Mike Madigan, who's been in news stories on and off for 50 years.
Yeah, well, it's not just Madigan. I mean, it's McLean, too. So that also adds, you got two defendants here adding to the complexities of all this.
And I will say McLean's team especially has been a little more focused, and especially since the judge talked about the show, they've been pretty short. But a couple of the Madigan attorneys have really, they're in no, perhaps I'm being cynical here, but as someone who's concerned, you watch the way that inefficiencies would happen in state government and the lack of regard at times for taxpayer dollars in the legislature. And you move that into this judicial proceeding. You say, well, these defense attorneys obviously don't care about the jurors' time or anyone else. One of the security attendant in the when the judge called for a short lunch break, he was disappointed. He said, boy, they're punishing us for these attorneys taking so long with their questions, so the lack of regard for others' time is a little bit disturbing as we're taxpayers, we're paying for all this. And so it's, I think anyone who's been called for a jury summons at one point or another has seen that things can move slowly. And it's part of that's maybe necessary. We don't want to go back to the days of tarring and feathering people. And, I was thinking to myself, and 200 years ago, Mike Madigan would have been out of town on a rail, right? So we want to have correct and fair justice, but if we don't pick up the pace, you're right, Greg. This is going to drag on longer, and then you get into conflicts where jurors say, "Hey, you said 10, 11 weeks, and now we're talking. If we're talking 12 or 14, we can have a problem." So it really has to move along. The judge has intimated that. But unless he gets a little bit tougher and maybe implements more of an old school, stricter courtroom here with these attorneys, and because at times they're like toddlers. If they're given a long leash, they're going to run with it.
Jim Talamonte, Chicago reporter for The Center Square, inside the federal courtroom where Mike Madigan and Mike McLean face corruption charges. Jury selection starting to see the end of the tunnel, and we could have opening statements coming in the afternoon hours Monday. And you'll obviously we'll have Brett Rowland there as well, covering some things. So you guys are tag teaming, making sure we keep people informed of where we're at on all this. So greatly appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Greg. And yeah, Brett's got a great background. He covered the ComEd 4 trial, and he'll be ready for Monday. I think and the McLean team to Tuesday, we're okay with that because I sensed that the Madigan team wasn't, that they wanted their opening arguments to immediately follow the prosecution. But if the jury selection drags into the afternoon, the opening statements could drag into Tuesday morning. But I think it looks pretty good, unless there's really an issue with jury selection. We should get into opening statements on Monday afternoon. But if we can't get both prosecutors 2 hours and then Madigan's hour in on Monday, then it could all push to Tuesday. And then again, like you said, Greg, we're losing another day. You think about, will there be an early exit for Halloween? Will there be court on Election Day? That's not an official holiday, but you have to give people a chance to vote. So there's a lot of, and then the other holidays after that. So you're right. We've got quite a road ahead.
We'll definitely stay up to date. Jim Talamonte with the Center Square. Greatly appreciate it. And we'll talk a little bit later on today. All right.
Thanks, Greg.
It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. This is with America's Talking Network and thecentersquare.com. Federal Judge Stephen McGlynn could issue a ruling in the case challenging Illinois' gun and magazine ban sometime after Monday. What is it going to be? Well, there's a lot of predictions out there, but will it be overturned if he issues an injunction? I guess we shall see. But one of the questions out there is what happens with those firearms that were bought during the previous injunction? State police said those are illegal after the start of 2024, 10 plus months ago. But what if it happens again? Where are we at in all of this? It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell with America's Talking Network, and join us at the Center Square for the latest headlines on all of this. So the past couple of days, I was on the road visiting a couple of different gun stores, Gat Guns in East Dundee, and also Law Weapons up in Naperville. And it was interesting to hear the contrast between the two locations in anticipation of what could be a final judgment from the district court against Illinois' gun and magazine ban. Because in East Dundee, they're ready to transfer firearms that were purchased during the previous injunction from April to early May, 6-day window where people were, not having PICA, the Protect Illinois Communities Act, enforced against them, and they went to gun stores and purchased those. But some of them may have purchased them on day 5 of that injunction week. And you got to have 3 days of a waiting period before you can pick that firearm up. So when the appeals court overturned that, you could see the dilemma there. But Gat Guns says they're ready to deliver those weapons if there's another injunction. But in Naperville, Law Weapons, as you saw earlier this week with Illinois in Focus, Robert Beavis saying that if there's an injunction for the state's ban, that's not going to impact Naperville's ban. He's still suing and all of that. But part of the trip up north from Springfield to East Dundee and Naperville was with Washington Gun Law, William Kirk. He was in Illinois from Washington State on a tour of sorts, and he shared with me some of what he's hearing on the ground from people attending his event.
Well, I'm finding out is we got a lot of followers out here. I love the fact that Washington Gun Law has been able to connect with the folks out here. I'm glad that we were able to be a voice of giving them some education so they could understand. Guys like you two that were helping, because there was a lot of insanity and it was happening fast and furious, and there's a lot of bad information out there. So the ability to give people accurate information and allow them to make up their own minds, that's kind of, you and I have similar roles there.
So he also talked about what could be the outcome sometime after Monday in the Southern District of Illinois Federal Court, and what the steps after that are going to be.
So I'll sum it up in 4 words. It's going to be win, stay, appeal, lose. Because what's going to happen is I do believe the trial court is going to follow the law, and you're going to win. and you're going to get an injunction. And I hope the injunction lasts a few days so at least the folks in Illinois can enjoy some semblance of freedom. But the Seventh Circuit's going to step in and stay it. You know they will. There will be an appeal, and the Seventh Circuit will flip it. Why is that? Because that's what happens every single time.
So that was obviously, a prediction that a lot of people are seeing because of what McGlynn, the federal judge in this case, said to close out that bench trial last month, saying that, the 1917 race riot in East St. Louis, if the black victims there had the firearms that were being debated in the courtroom, would they have been able to better protect themselves from being victimized? So somewhat telegraphing what could be the outcome in the Southern District court case. But to that, Freedom Week that happened back in April, late April to early May in 2023 on preliminary grounds, again, people went out and purchased their firearms, and some of them weren't able to pick them up. But those who did, there was a question about whether or not those would be legal, because once the appeals court stepped in and stayed the lower court's preliminary injunction, all of a sudden the law was back in effect. A year ago, this is from 2023, October, I talked with State Senator Jason Plummer, who had filed legislation to clear it up, that people who purchased firearms when the law was not in effect because of any kind of court action, those firearms are not subject to the Protect Illinois Communities Act. But that measure didn't really go anywhere. Here's a bit of what Plummer had to say back a year ago when I chatted with him.
A little history here, between I believe it was April 28th and May 4th, a federal court ruling injunction blocked implementation of this gun ban. During that period of time, many Illinoisans went out, legally purchased firearms, and did business with local gun shops, whatever else. When that ruling came out, when that federal ruling came out that blocked the implementation of the law, I immediately reached out to the governor's office, the attorney general's office, the Illinois State Police. I know a lot of other people did as well, to seek guidance so that we could provide information to gun shops, to gun owners, to potential gun owners, because we're getting a lot of questions from constituents. The Illinois State Police did get right back to us, and they deferred to the Attorney General. And the Attorney General and the Governor's Office provided absolutely no information, silence, complete crickets for a week, when they needed to be providing information and guidance to their constituents, to the citizens of Illinois. On May 6th, the Attorney General finally did issue guidance after that injunction was removed. And they stated that firearms that were included in the ban that were purchased or picked up during that window would be illegal starting January 1st, 2024. So, when a ruling went against the governor and the attorney general, they went silent, and they allowed thousands of Illinoisans to go out, exercise their constitutional right. And then when the ruling was, or when the injunction was removed, they were immediately dropping information, basically saying, we're coming after everyone who exercised their constitutional rights during that week. And I just think that's wrong. Again, regardless where you stand on the gun issue, pro or con, it's the job of the governor, it's the job of the attorney general to treat all Illinoisans equally and to provide them information, not set them up to be penalized for doing what millions of people do, every year across the country.
And again, that was Jason Plummer, state senator, talking about his measure that would essentially, say, hey, if people purchased firearms that are banned by the Protect Illinois Communities Act, whenever the law was halted from being enforced by a court order, then they're safe from prosecution. Again, that measure has not advanced. But he said that the law really should just be halted until the final determination by the federal court system, like the U.S. Supreme Court. But then you get into the registration component, and there really hasn't been much focus on that, especially since the last numbers that they published from the Illinois State Police for the registration was, I believe, back in January of this year, January 31st. I'm going to pull this up really quick to see if the numbers have been updated. But let's see here. Protect Illinois Communities Act statistics. Yeah, so looks like the last date they have this updated is almost 10 months ago. So, again, a year ago, Governor Pritzker was asked about the low registration numbers, and he said that's a right-wing talking point.
So I hate that mainstream media are picking up right-wing media talking points, so let me correct you a little bit. Yeah, there are 2.4 million FOID card holders in the state of Illinois. 2.4 million people do not have assault weapons. So when you talk about the percentage of people who are filing and registering, it's a much higher percentage than what you've cited of the people who are required to do so. I can tell you, at least for me, that I think all of us, take our time sometimes when we know the deadline is 2.5 months hence, that we'll find the time eventually to go online, which is what they need to do, and to register as they're required to do. So we expect there to be more and more people as we get closer to the deadline, which is the end of the year, to do so. And, people who don't, obviously, at some point, they will be breaking the law.
So again, the governor, that was a year ago, he talked about, taking questions of, there's a low registration number. It's the percentage of, people who have registered versus FOID card holders. And it was maybe single digits approaching, maybe double digits. Either way, the total number of, individuals filing affidavits compared to the total number of FOID cards was, some estimations, abysmal. But, there was Robert Morgan there, state representative who helped spearhead the law. Again, this is from a year ago where he said, hey, people would register or else they're going to lose their FOID cards.
They want to be law-abiding citizens and they want to be consistent with state law, and they will register their existing legacy weapons. Otherwise, they're risking their FOID card. And I think the vast, vast majority of people are just committed to being law-abiding citizens the way they are now.
So, again, I don't know if that spurred people on to register because the numbers just don't reflect that. Back to William Kirk from earlier this week when he was visiting with a couple of gun stores, again, from Washington Gun Law. He said that, the Supreme Court's really going to be the final arbiter in all this. But even if McGlynn issues a permanent injunction sometime after next week, and then the appeals court comes in and puts a stay on that, it could, go to the U.S. Supreme Court, but there's already another case that could come up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that's the case out of Maryland. And Kirk says that likely that's going to be first up, and there should be, some actions that the Seventh Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals should take because of that.
Because when Illinois' cases went up, they were still kind of in an interlocutory fashion, or it's a fancy word of saying it was before the end of the football game, okay? What's good about the Maryland case is it is final. It is complete. There's nothing else left to do. It is ripe for review. And what's also good is it carries with it a magazine capacity ban as well. So a lot of those issues that they're struggling with here in Illinois, California, out in my home state of Washington, are going to be resolved by the Supreme Court.
And he has some final words for people in Illinois concerned about this issue.
Just quick to the folks of Illinois, I realize that you guys think there is no Second Amendment out there. I know as an Illinois resident that would be tough to do, but if you take a more of a 35,000-foot view and you see what's happening on the national level, the Second Amendment is alive and well, and it will come to rescue you here in Illinois someday, too.
So at some point today, I expect there to be some filings from the litigants in this, as McGlynn gave them about 30 days to file final briefs on text history and tradition. So if those are filed today, we'll review those Monday, and then we'll be refreshing the court's page quite a bit to see if and when McGlynn issues some kind of order. Will it be Monday? Not sure. Could it be a week or so, maybe 3 weeks after Monday, to give McGlynn time to digest the briefs that are going to be filed and write his ruling on that? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. So be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here with America's Talking Network, as we'll keep you updated with Illinois in Focus daily. There's a popular trope of people waiting in line at the DMV, and kind of reminiscent of, Beetlejuice, where he goes to see his caseworker And he has to take that, line ticket, and he pulls it out and it says like 1,075,000. And then you see on the, now serving board, and it says serving number 3. Listen, waiting in line at the DMV, everybody's got their own stories, but soon that's not going to be the case necessarily. Secretary of State Alexi Giannoulias here in Illinois was up in Chicago, where he unveiled a new DMV ATM, but he says it's not going to cost taxpayers. So let's hear all about it. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop here with America's Talking Network. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and get the headlines at thecentersquare.com. So here's the Secretary of State yesterday in Chicago laying out this new program, a pilot program he has, to have ATMs that are going to be servicing things the DMV typically services.
Well, today we're very excited to announce our Fast Lane kiosks, or ATM DMVs, which allow Illinoisans for the first time ever to skip a trip to the DMV by offering vehicle registration, driver's license renewal, state ID renewals at grocery stores across the entire state of Illinois. It's as easy as stop, shop, scan, and renew, and it all takes about 2 minutes. Customers simply scan the renewal notice or enter their unique code into the kiosk and follow the directions on the touchscreen to complete their transaction. At the end of the transaction, the customer receives their renewal documents.
So it's pretty incredible. He talked more about where this is going to be implemented throughout Illinois, but he said that it's a program that's being used by other states as well.
DMV service kiosks already operate in approximately 20 states, and it's important to note that these kiosks are not funded by the state and do not present any additional costs to Illinois taxpayers. The vendor charges $4.95 per transaction and a credit card processing fee if applicable. This is less expensive and more convenient than renewing at most currency exchanges or emission testing sites where many Illinoisans go to renew their vehicle registration. For the pilot phase, we have partnered with our great friends at Mariano's, Jewel Oscar, Meyer, and Kroger to place 15 Fast Lane kiosks in communities around the state. Our goal ultimately is to get to over 150 kiosks throughout the state of Illinois.
So again, the Secretary of State laying out some of the plans here with this pilot program and how it's going to be further implemented.
Again, we are anticipating that a fully implemented program will involve well over 150 kiosks. For context, Michigan has more than 150 and California has about 250. So to learn more and find your nearest Fast Lane kiosk, I encourage you to visit www.ilsos.gov/kiosks.
And this, is pretty interesting to see it in person. He did give us that run through, a demonstration of sorts. And if you look at the website, you'll see that there's kiosks in Chicago and the suburbs, even in Springfield. And he wants to have upwards to 100 kiosks across the state after they check out how this is being utilized, how many people are using it in certain areas, and so on. But he said it's not going to cost the taxpayers anything. It's going to have a surcharge of close to $5 if you use it. But what about savings? Is it going to provide any savings from saying nobody's going to have to, accept you at the DMV if you're going to be going to this kiosk instead?
Great question. The answer is yes. For folks to be able to come on a Sunday morning and perform a service that they would have had to go to the DMV takes resources that we would have to expand in our facilities, even though they're not necessary during the weekday at our busiest facilities. So the answer is yes. I view this as creating efficiencies, helping reduce foot traffic at our facilities, and just helping the process smoother by offering more options. Additionally, in rural areas in Illinois, where sometimes DMVs are very far away, this allows an individual or a family on their way out of the grocery store to avoid having to drive 30, 45 minutes an hour just to get to a place, park their vehicle, go inside, and get it done if they choose not to use online services.
So clearly, automation, right? There's a concern from some that automation is going to take away jobs, but if that automation is something to make a state program more efficient, is that going to save taxpayers dollars? So we'll see how this plays out, but the timeline of getting even more of these across the states, these kiosks, because You go into a fast food joint now and you see a kiosk there and you order it up. Well, now you're going to be able to do that with the DMV at a kiosk at a grocery store, for instance. But how fast are we going to see this implemented across the state?
Our goal is to let these things give us some data so we can see what services people are requiring, which spots, which locations have more foot traffic. To answer your question, our goal, I think, is in the next couple months to take a look at what's been happening and then start slowly expanding them to other locations, other areas throughout the state based on the data.
So, ATM DMV at a grocery store near you soon, where you can go and renew your license. You can get a license plate sticker, and we'll see what other kinds of programs they implement with that to make it less of time waste, a time tax, as the Secretary of State says, and having to deal with the DMV. All right, it's Illinois in Focus Daily. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell with us here at America's Talking Network. I really appreciate you guys. It was a pretty interesting week. Met some of you while I was on the road at East Dundee at Gat Guns and then Law Weapons in Naperville. Always amazed at how many people watch, and you guys watch every morning, so I really do appreciate that. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, get to thecentersquare.com, get the newsletter, and be sure to stay tuned because there's going to be a lot popping off. Of course, we got the election coming up. Obviously, it's big news, but here with Illinois in Focus, we're going to keep you posted on things impacting Illinois directly. So have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday with Illinois in Focus Daily. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Check out the headlines at thecentersquare.com and get this podcast anywhere you get podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus.